on. So welcome to everybody this morning. We're really grateful for we've been really overwhelmed by the positive response we've had to the session this morning, with over 150 leaders from the legal community registered to attend, which I think shows quite how important this topic is to all of us at the moment. And we're particularly pleased to see the diversity of how many people across different countries in Europe are with us today. I'm Lisa Owens, and I'm joined as a co-host by my colleague Bianca Adams-Tomand. We're both managing directors in the in-house legal search team at EMEA, based in London, or should be based in London. And we all at EMEA feel very passionately about mental health. As our clients, our candidates and the legal community all adjust to the challenges of the last year. Almost every discussion we currently have with General Counsel touches on the concerns of motivating and retaining a remote team, looking after the well-being of lawyers across many, many different cultures, and how to adjust to the new challenges we all face. And I think there's genuine concern amongst leaders as to how these changes will affect all of us and what leadership will look like going forwards. So we hope today is just a start of opening a dialogue and an opportunity to share ideas, share experiences, and to really help and support each other, and also to shine a light on the additional challenges and responsibilities these issues raise for leaders in the legal community. I've got a few housekeeping points just to run through. All attendees are in listen-only mode, so you are all already muted, and all the cameras are off, so you can see us, but we can't see you. The call is being recorded and will be available on our website over the next few days to listen to afterwards or to share. We're aiming for the discussion to last around 60 minutes, but this will include 20 minutes or so for questions and answers. So we strongly encourage you to ask questions. The chat function will be managed behind the scenes, so the questions are all private, and we'll be putting the questions to the panel during the last 20 minutes. So please put the questions on your chat function whenever you think of them. Don't wait until the end. And if we don't get through all the questions this morning, if we do run out of time, we'll try and come back to everybody individually to answer those questions. We also wanted to point out that we're running this session under Chatham House rules. So all of the panelists are speaking in a private capacity and not representing the views of their companies. And I'm sure that will be reiterated by Chris when I hand over in a minute. So I'm delighted to hand over to Chris Parsons of Herbert Smith, who's chairing the discussion today, and he in turn will introduce the panel. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Lisa, and a very warm welcome to everyone who's joined us today on this session on workplace mental health, which is obviously of enormous importance, I hope, to all organisations and to all of us at an individual level as well. And in particular, we're going to be hearing from 3 senior GCs about how they've tackled the problem of looking after their teams, not only during lockdown, but more generally, because this is an issue that's relevant at all times and in all places. I did want to say a big thanks to Major Lindsay in Africa for the idea of hosting this webinar. I really strongly feel that in this area, we should all be collaborating and supporting and helping each other and sharing ideas. It's not something that I think we should be keeping to ourselves. So if stuff works effectively, we should share that and make sure that we can all support our teams and our employees effectively. The 2 sponsors, as you've heard from MLA, are Lisa and Bianca, so we're particularly grateful to them. My name is Chris Parsons, as you can see from the slide, and as Lisa mentioned. My day job is as chairman of the firm's India practice, and until lockdown, I used to spend 2 weeks every month on the ground in India, and I did that have been doing that for the last 16 years, which has been extraordinary, as you can imagine. But apart from India, my other big passion is mental well-being, and that's of course the reason why I've been asked to host or to chair this panel today. And the reason for that interest is because of my own personal struggles. So I struggled with stress, anxiety, and depression, and for rather too many years I self-medicated with alcohol to such an extent that I became an alcoholic. And whilst I'm currently in a good place, I recognize that the challenges of depression and alcoholism can always come back to bite me. So it's something that I speak to organizations about and individuals about to try and find ways of sharing best practice that we can all be looking after our teams. So as I mentioned, as you can see on the screen, we're joined by 3 senior GPs today, and I'm just going to introduce each of them in turn. So firstly, Maria Hemberg, who's GC of Volvo Cars. Volvo Cars was owned by Ford up until 2010 and then was acquired by a Chinese group called the Geely Group. Secondly, Beatrice Voss, who is the EMEA GC of Elanco, and Elanco is a global animal health business. And then thirdly, Marco Kerschen is the international GC of Wallgreens Boots Alliance, which was formed following the merger of those 3 companies, and which is one of the biggest healthcare companies in the world. And as Lisa mentioned in the introduction, the format is that I'm going to have the opportunity to quiz our panel on various questions to do with mental well-being, and then we're going to allow plenty of time for all of you to ask your questions. So at any time, please do pop your questions into the chat box, and Lisa and Bianca will collect those and we'll run through those at the end. So that's the plan. We'll finish promptly at 11 a.m. UK time, 12 noon Central European time. So this is my chance then, so I'm going to fire away. I wonder if I can ask each of you in turn just to set the scene, and to set the scene by really describing your team, who you're responsible for, and their sort of the numbers and the geographic spread. And then we'll go on in a little bit to talk about what you do to look after those teams. So in no particular order, why don't we start with Beatrice?
Sure. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. I'm very grateful for the great interest that people have shown in this really very important topic that I think is really relevant for everybody. So to answer your question, Chris, I'm responsible for the legal team at Elanco Animal Health in the EMEA region, Europe, Middle East, and Africa. It's a team of 15 people, and we handle all legal matters that come up in that region, with the exception of IP. We have a separate intellectual property legal team, but everything else runs across our desks, be it contracts, regulatory, HR, commercial, etc. You all know the type of work that we deal with.
Great, thank you, Beatrice. And Maria?
Yeah, first of all, an honor to be on the panel here, and to answer your question, I have a quite broad area of responsibility because I'm obviously in charge of the legal team. That is the biggest team, a global organization. Then I have compliance and ethics. I also have our IP department, and I'm also heading up the corporate development as well as governance function in our company. So altogether we are roughly 90 people spread out over the globe. We have a quite big team in Hemberg in Sweden, as we are a Swedish-based company, but very many of our team members are out in various parts of the organization and sometimes quite alone, which has apparently been more of a challenge during this last year.
Great, thank you, Maria. And then Marco, please.
Thank you, Chris, and equally delighted to be on this panel of a topic that I think has become more and more prevalent over the last months with the pandemic. I'm the general counsel for the international business at Wallgreens Boots Alliance, which consists of our wholesale business, predominantly across Europe, and then our retail businesses, the retail pharmacies that we own and operate both outside the US and the UK and Ireland. So that means I'm responsible for the legal support for those in Mexico, Chile, Thailand, Norway, Netherlands. So there's quite a number of countries. And then in addition, I also support with my team the global brands business, which is a healthcare and beauty care businesses that WBA has, which includes brands that people in the UK probably know, like Number 7, Your Good Skin, Les Earl, and a few others. And so I'm leading a fantastic team of 70 plus legal professionals that predominantly sit outside the UK. I'm based in the UK, but my team sits predominantly outside. So, and it ranges from a team in Mexico of close to 20 people down to a colleague in Lithuania who sits all by himself. So I think the challenges that are being experienced in these times are quite different. So, it's been a difficult time for people in the different regions. And like you, Chris, I used to be on the ground, used to travel more than 50% of my time to visit teams, which obviously has come to a halt over the last year now.
Great. Well, look, thank you, all of you. That's given me a really good sense of scale and geographic coverage. And we'll come to culture in a minute, because I know that's a big topic, and it's something that I'm very aware of through my work in India, of course. I wonder if maybe we could now move to you describing perhaps a couple of initiatives each that your organizations have undertaken during this time or at any other time that specifically focused on mental well-being and that you feel that has worked effectively within your organization. So Maria, are you happy to take that one first?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I think when I joined my company a bit more than 9 years ago, we were really in the process to become a truly global organization. And in that context, it was already from the start important to build on something which was very much relying on digital interaction. And I also strongly believe in having a team where it's not about hours in the office, it's about what you actually deliver and what you contribute. So one of my guiding principles when I joined was to the team, I don't care where you work, I don't care during this time, which time of the day, as long as I know where I can get hold of you and I know that I can count on you, we have a common ground. And I think that has been a very helpful element when it comes to managing the pandemic and the crisis, because I think we had a quite well established and good working environment, which didn't only rely on us traveling around the globe. So to us, it has been more a continuation and an acceleration of a journey we had embarked long before the crisis hit us.
Okay, that's interesting, and you were obviously very well prepared to deal with what then came to pass, because actually working practices sound as though they haven't changed that much within Volvo.
No, I think the change has been that we have been, of course, forced to not have the in real life meetings, and we have worked a lot trying to make up the fun part which you miss out on when you can't have physical interaction. I think here in Sweden we have been quite fortunate, because we are obviously a country where we very much rely on people's sort of willingness to do things the right thing rather than having very firm rules. So we didn't have complete lockdown, so we could continue having a safe environment in the office where people still could elect to be to a quite large extent. And I think that has been important when it comes to people's well-being, because not everyone is blessed with a home office which is a proper and good environment. So that has been one helpful ingredient which we have built on.
Super, thank you. Marco, what about in terms of what Wallgreens Alliance Boots has been doing?
Yeah, I think obviously for a company where I think if you look at our mission, it's focused around obviously health and well-being of patients and of our customers, which is our business model. It is supporting patients that come to our pharmacies, getting medications to patients in hospitals. So externally focused, this has always been our mission. And I think our business model is caring about the well-being and the health of our customers and patients. So internally, I think for us, we have been a culture that was very much focused on physical interaction, and presence in the office was very important for us. So like we do it with our patients, it is not a remote relationship, it is a connection that happens at the pharmacy level. It is a culture that was also very much with how we work and how we operated in the past. And I think that has shifted quite a bit, I have to admit, because even the meetings and the working from home, I think initially it was something that we adapted to, and then it went really, really quickly, because I think getting the use of technology with all its limitations, I mean, which we have all seen now, that connectivity does not mean the same thing if you do it over the internet than if you do it in person. But so we have adapted rapidly by rolling out technology tools that were still being tested at the time. But the core mission of the company, externally but also internally focused with its own employees, has not changed. It is about caring about the well-being. And so I think we had in place certain programs, and I think that existed through a partnership with external companies that are available for people to call if they are not feeling well. So those things existed in the past. I think they have been used more now, and we have made sure to advertise them more. But I think we've gone above and beyond this, and I think maybe later on I can share some examples of how in our team we've really implemented things to make it more of a topic, because I think in the past, at least, it was something that was available but wasn't really discussed. Well-being and mental health wasn't really, at least in team settings or in our organization, was more something that was private or personal. And I think that has changed because we have taken a proactive approach to really bring it up as a topic. And I think that's some of the learnings that I think I can share later on, maybe on how we bring it up and all the sensitivity that it brings when you look at this on a global basis with the different ways people react to a word like mental health that has many different connotations in different cultures, and where you need to adapt on how you broach it and how you how to create a safe space for people to talk about these issues.
Yeah, no, that's good. We'll definitely come back to that, to the issue around creating a safe place and trust. And Elanco, Beatrice.
Yeah, so at Elanco, we were a bit unfortunate in the last 2 years that or last 18 months of the pandemic coincided with a particularly high workload. And I really think that workload and well-being, they can be very closely connected if the workload management isn't good. Our workload was higher than usual because Elanco has always been part of Eli Lilly and Company, an American international pharmaceuticals company. And this animal health division has grown so much over the last 10 years that Lilly decided to spin us off and IPO Elanco in 2018. So with that, we were kind of in a startup mode, right? We lost the support of the 250 lawyers on the Lilly side. We were a bit on our own. Very exciting, but also it was very work intense. And only 6 months after that spin-off and IPO, we explored the acquisition of Bayer's animal health business, which was up for sale at that time. Maybe not the ideal time, but truly the ideal deal for Elanco. So from basically the beginning of 2019 until closing August last year, I was fully immersed in that project, in that deal, and the whole company was very busy with that acquisition. It was close to $8 billion acquisition, and since then we're integrating the business. So all of that just caused a very unusual high workload for the team, and not just for the legal team, for the organization as a whole. And it has for a number of people also caused really issues with stress management, and then working from home, where you obviously have less like coffee chats with your colleagues, right? I mean, we've been conscious now about having virtual coffee chats, but if you're in the office and you go and get a coffee and you bump into a colleague and you just chat about it, that can really help a lot with managing your stress, right? I mean, realizing others are in the same boat. So there was less of that during the pandemic, and there is still less of that given the working from home. So what we do very, very consciously in my team is that we address the workload topic, and we've been through a very rigorous process of prioritizing our work and focus on things that really matter, that really move the needle. And we're very explicit with the business about the things that we won't do anymore. We have efficient templates. We try to use automated contracting systems. There are many things available that help managing workload better, and so that's really something that we explore. And I know that many of my team members are on the call, so they're doing fantastic work in getting that done. The second point is similar to what Maria said: this flexibility around when and where you work. And I think in non-corona times, it is helpful for people, especially with multiple things on their plate, be it family, children, a working spouse, hobbies that you want to follow. If you have some flexibility, right? If you don't have this 9 to 5, or I mean, I think in our profession, often 9 to 8, 9 to 9 job in the office, but if there's a bit more flexibility as to when and where you work. And I think in Corona times, even more so. I mean, with schools closed, we have to take care of our children at home, so that there needs to be some flexibility as to being able to cook lunch for the children or have dinner with them, and then sitting back at your desk again later in the evening. I personally use that atmosphere for my hobby. I'll elaborate a bit on that later, but I think having a hobby and something that you're really passionate about, that you do only for yourself, is I think very, very important, and can really save you from drowning and really having huge mental well-being issues. One very practical thing that we do at Elanco is a part-time offer where employees can choose to get paid 95% of their normal salary throughout the year, and they have an extra 15 days of holidays which they have to take during the summer holidays. And also our colleagues in the US, who typically have less discretionary holidays than others, because in Europe, they get an extra week off. So we have 1 week shut down in the US in the summer, so that our US colleagues have some more spare time as well.
Okay, I rather like the idea of being able to buy some holiday entitlement. And it didn't sound too much money for 15 days. So I could sign up to that scheme.
Yeah, well, you don't know our salaries, right?
We've touched on a little bit, but just the fact that you've got teams spread out across the world, and I know from India that mental ill health, that the stigma is larger there than it would be in the UK, and there would be different challenges in Japan, and so have you had to find ways of trying to address these different cultural type issues in order to support your teams, and to the extent you have encountered these problems, how have you tried to overcome them? So perhaps Marco, we could start with you on that one, please.
Yeah, I think that this is, I mean, as I said before, thanks, Chris. I've seen this firsthand, because having teams, meant the approach to the topic, from colleagues who sit in China to colleagues who sit in Latin America to colleagues in Europe is very different, and it's a topic that, at least in my experience, we were very careful not to approach it the same way. And one thing, as I mentioned, is I think the words mental health are triggering probably different reactions in different cultures. And so what I did, for instance, is it is a topic that I would say maybe in the US and in Europe, in Central Europe, probably in the UK, it is a topic that was much more, at least the term is more common, and people understand that it is not as much of a negative connotation as people may attach to it, or the stigma, as you mentioned. So I think the way I've tried to describe it, rather than use that word and rely more on the word of well-being. And so one of the things that that I've really done with my team, as I said, 70 people sitting across the world, is we've increased the frequency of our touch bases, and I think that has been facilitated through the technology. In the past, we did it by phone. Now we're doing it video, which adds an element of reading facial expressions, which gives that, creating that safe space and really opening it up and putting it as an agenda item, asking people how they feel. Now, I can tell people that may sound weird when you ask this, and it may sound that you get the initial reaction is that people think this is an opening of a conversation, that you say, how are you? But I have made it a point to truly insist on how do you feel, and then wait and let people talk and listen to what they have to say, and not use the keywords, but just really ask how they feel. How are they dealing with the anxiety, the stress? How are they dealing with it? And also looking out for symptoms. And I think there are certain signs that you have to be more vigilant these days about people, both in their behavior, in the language they use, in the work they do, how they react. Are they more irritable? Is their work performance suffering? So I think it's looking out for some of those signs. And then I think in Europe, in the UK, for instance, with the team, we really brought it up, and I asked people, I gave them some advice on how to deal with it. So we really made it a debate, a topic on our agenda, talking about mental health and how people can address it, and some ideas on how to deal with it, which I'm sure we're going to get to a little bit later. But for me, it's finding the right language, being with questioning, open-ended questions, not putting a label on it, creating a safe space, and watching out for signs, and repeating it, not making it just a one-time thing. Because I think for me now, I'm doing it on every catch-up that I have, because it should not be, it should be genuine. And I think what I think in these times, what companies, what leaders will be judged by is authenticity. The things that we ask, that it is not a corporate mechanism, that it's a keyword that we use, we check it off a list like an annual appraisal, we have to do it, it gets done, and then the caravan moves on. So I think that, to me, if you really mean it, it has to be a recurring topic to address and to bring up.
I think that's really helpful, Mark. And what I've taken from that is what you're seeking to do is to really embed the notion of well-being in the culture. And the more often you raise it, the more embedded it is, and the more often you raise it, the more you normalize what might otherwise be a difficult topic. And so I completely agree with that. Maria, did you have anything to answer that? Sorry.
I think one thing. Sorry. Yeah. One thing which I think has been even more important the last year is to be a very careful listener, and also to try to see and read things between the lines. And what I have felt has been often very helpful is to actually start just sharing my own reflections and feelings. I was into a bit of a crisis mood a couple of weeks ago when I just felt I can't stand this any longer. And I was very open. I had a workshop which were not at all about well-being or COVID or anything, but I just said to everyone attending, can't we just have 5 minutes where we are allowed to complain and just let each other know what we feel? And it really didn't last only 5 minutes. It was a quite long conversation, but it showed how much was underneath the surface, which just came out. And I think that is leading by example, and being human is very important in all leadership, but I think throughout the crisis, probably even more important. I think what we have also encouraged our team member to do is, of course, to focus on doing some exercise. So we try to encourage people to have walking meetings. If they are located in the same city, we say, if you have to do some work together, why don't you meet up for a walk in a park or whatever? Don't feel that you have to sit in front of the computer. You can be anywhere. And reminding everyone that the problem starts with your own perception of what are the boundaries, because you can really do much more to improve your own well-being just by being creative. And we have also had a bit of a sharing best practice where people have been encouraged to ship in ideas, and it has been a little bit like this, but every time you remind people, any news, what can we learn from each other? We have had teams who had wine tasting digitally. Digital fikas is probably in everyone's calendar, but there are also many things you can do.
Great, thank you, Maria. Just a couple of observations on that. One is that I spent some time, I sit on the board of a mental health charity called MFU Mental Health Research. And through that, I met an expert in stigma around mental health. His name is Professor Graham Thornycroft. And he said the best way to break down stigma is for people within the organization, often senior people within an organization, sharing their stories. And that very much helps to give permission to other people to talk about it and to break down the sense that there's something, you know, fundamentally wrong with having a mental health issue and having a high-performing job. And so that's really important, and I'm pleased to hear that. The other one, I rather like the idea of walking meetings. I had a mate when I used to live in Singapore who said to his PA that he was only ever prepared to take a lunchtime meeting if the person who wanted to have the meeting with him was prepared to go for a run with him. And you can imagine, he was a super fit chap. So I can't believe he had many takers, or indeed whether there would have been much discussion on his runs. Anyway. Beatrice, what about from Elanco?
I mean, so much was said already. Difficult to add anything new. I agree with everything that you all said. I think the empathy, genuine interest, both ways, right? I think this is not just you speaking with your reports and asking them how they are. I think if it becomes a genuinely interested conversation, it goes both ways, and it's not much different from how you treat your friends and family, right? I mean, you have an interest in their well-being, and if you work closely with your team members or other colleagues in the company, you will likely develop an interest in how they're doing, right? So it's not a tick-the-box exercise, but I speak at least weekly with all of my team members, but we have additional ad hoc meetings, and just very naturally, every conversation starts by saying, "How's life? How are you doing? How are the kids?" And yeah, I think that's important. But this leading by example, I think, is crucial, because I mean, I think we all seem to agree on the fact that mental issues are not a taboo and they shouldn't be stigmatized. There are many people still who think differently, and that's why I think it's so important that companies are very explicit about it not being an issue, and leaders sharing their issues. Chris, I really applaud you for being so open with the issues that you have had, and that really speaks for the culture at Herbert Smith and how you deal with issues of that sort. Maybe I can quickly share my story with my horse riding. So horseback riding is my passion. I rode during my entire childhood and youth and absolutely loved it. And then I got busy. I studied. I started working. I've always been working full time. Got married, had 3 kids, a dog, and I always thought I'm too busy. I love riding. I dreamt of riding very often, but I somehow always thought I'm too busy to do it. And then in the middle of this Bayer Animal Health deal, where at some point I was really close to drowning and thinking this is too much and I can't handle it anymore. My husband said, well, you should have something that is just for you, that you enjoy, that's like your breathing space, nothing that you do for the company, for the husband, for the household, for the children, but really just for you. And I didn't have to think much. It was obviously writing. So in the middle of this very busy deal, probably one of the busiest times of my life, I took up horseback riding again, beginning of last year, and end of last year bought a beautiful horse. I ride 5 times a week, of which 3, maybe 4 times is during the week. It always takes 2 hours in the stable, and it's a 30-minute drive getting there and back home. And my team knows it, my colleagues know it. I always have calls in the car, and they're all very supportive of it. And I really try to encourage everybody to have something similar. This breathing space and time where you unwind does wonders to your well-being.
Yeah, that's a nice story, Beatrice. Thank you. And I think that's a nice segue into maybe asking our other 2 colleagues as well. So I read a piece of Accenture research recently, and what that indicated was that there were 3 categories. I'm sure there are far more, but there were 3 particular categories that were struggling at the moment in terms of mental health issues. The first category was working parents, and so the tension between looking after kids at home and working from home, which would seem to be completely understandable. The second category were working carers, so the same thing, but you're looking maybe after elderly parents or somebody else. And so those 2 groups were already struggling. And then the third group, interestingly, were senior executives. And what the research tends to show in non-lockdown terms is that senior executives are often in a better place than more junior ones. And the argument for that is that even though they've got more responsibility, they have more control over their lives. And there's lots of research that says if you feel out of control, then that's a big issue, and you can struggle in those circumstances. But the lockdown, the virus, has meant that because nobody's really known how it's going to pan out, certainly prior to the vaccine coming along. So a lot of senior executives were A, working much harder, and B, had less control over what was happening within the organization. Some organizations, I appreciate, were really thriving at this time. Other organizations were really struggling. So Beatrice, you very clearly described your passion, your purpose, your escape. I wondered if there are ways in which you, Marco, and you, Maria, have found to look after yourselves, because unless we look after ourselves, we can't help and support other people. So maybe Maria first.
Yeah, that is probably an area where I have partly failed, I must say. I was quite it started well during last spring and summer, where I really set aside time to spend outdoor exercising. But in Sweden, during the dark season, you don't really want to go out. And finding the right way to exercise and to keep really up to speed with that has been a bit of a hard one. Now I can luckily see that the sun is back and the light is back, so I'm getting back on track. But I wish I had a hobby in the same way as you, Beatrice, because I think it helps a lot really to commit to something. Well, what I did quite recently was that one of my friends, she is also working very hard, and we agreed that if we at least schedule power walks over lunch, we will have so much pressure on each other, so those lunches will happen. So that has been my latest trick to try to get back on track. Commit to something.
Thank you. And Marco, what about you?
Well, I think 2 things. One, I think it's good you're mentioning it, because lawyers, we tend to be like under, a lot of pressure, react under pressure. And lately, I think it's high-powered, high pressure jobs, and in our functions, anything that looks at failure or as a weakness, obviously we don't want to admit, or we don't want to deal with it. So we're looking after our teams, and we sometimes or oftentimes then forget to look at after ourselves. On a topic like this, I think it is important. Unfortunately, I don't have a perfect situation or perfect solution that I can say that applied to myself. So I'm not going to lie here, but what I've come to learn and experience maybe is that it is small steps. It is literally small steps to try to get positive experiences in times of stress, and to make, because obviously, like everybody else, I tried to do exercise more, eat better, you know, be all of these things, and then quickly I realized that even though the time slots that I would try to block on my calendar would quickly fill up because there would be priorities and conflicts, and then I ended up accepting nonetheless the work commitments because of pressures or because of priorities that needed to be dealt with. Absolutely. So for me, the little tricks I did is, one is blocking small slots. I failed with the big slots, so I'm trying to do it small breaks, so of a half an hour. So that was, I tried to do longer blocks or later in the evening that I blocked it, but so now I'm doing half-hour blocks. Plus, what I found is really working well for me is just connecting with friends again and doing these walks. They may not be qualified as power walks like Maria's walk, certainly not galloping on horses, but it really friends that I haven't connected maybe in the past as much, and then to go out and walk. We go out, walk for an hour, and that has been really, I don't take a phone call, I leave my phone at home. So it forces me to disconnect to some extent, but it also catches up, and I'm outdoors, so I'm combining little things. But truly the message is to get positive experiences through small steps rather than looking for big blocks or maybe having to buy a horse.
Thank you.
And maybe just quickly add here that, of course, I mean, having some time in a day to do private things or follow hobbies, it does require to start working at 6 in the morning, or maybe work until 10 in the evening, right? So there's, of course, I mean, the work needs to get done. But that from my perspective, is a positive aspect during this working from home period, that there is this flexibility, right? To start earlier or work later in the evening, which then gets you some time during the day to follow, I don't know, spend time with family, friends, whatever. And I do have the hope that the whole world learned through the pandemic that working from home really is an alternative, maybe not forever full time, but at least some days in a week that really works. It depends a lot on your job, but I think for lawyers very often that is something that can really work. And you may have read that Freshfoods has started this initiative that they allow associates to work from home up to 3 days per week on a regular basis. We are also looking at a long-term working from home policy, which allows people to opt in. They don't have to. If they want to go to the office, they can. But I think that's really taking some benefits and learnings from this situation.
Great, thank you, Beatrice. What I'm going to suggest now is I've got a whole bunch of other questions inevitably because I'm so interested in this topic. But I'm going to pause now and just check in with Lisa and Beatrice to see what questions that we've got from the audience, because I'm keen that we should pick those up and not miss those. So perhaps we could turn to those, and then if we have time, we can come back to my other questions as well. So Lisa, perhaps over to you for a moment.
I think Bianca's has got a question to ask.
Yeah,
Thank you,
super.
Chris.
Hi, Bianca.
Such an enjoyable, insightful conversation. I think before the Q&A session, I must say that over the years, definitely found lawyers especially having a work-life balance challenge. So this is definitely front and center well-being and mental health, or as a general counsel, to Marco's point, the different cultural pieces called it mental fitness recently, which I quite like that in terms of just inspiring and encouraging people across the globe. So we'll now start our Q&A session. And something, if you haven't asked a question, you can do so via the question chat in terms of the control panel on your screen. The first question we have is just a very interesting one, is do you recognise particular personality traits of lawyers which maybe make them more predisposed to mental health challenges? And if so, what would they be?
Bianca, I missed some of that, I'm afraid. I don't know if the rest of the panel managed to hear it all. If you did, please fire away. But I didn't hear the question, I'm afraid. Marco, or Beatrice?
I heard it. Yeah. So character traits or lawyer typical character traits that make us more vulnerable to mental health issues. And I think that's absolutely true. I think lawyers have a tendency to be very client focused, especially those in private practice, right? We don't really question whether we should be asked a particular question. We just do it. We serve the client, and I think I think lawyers also have this tendency to be to wanting to be in control, right? I think that they're personalities who are highly ambitious, controlling, and this period where we don't have things under control, and we don't know whether we'll always be able to serve our clients, given what's going on, and just not knowing for how much longer it will be and what the restrictions will be. I think that is probably that might really be particularly difficult to bear for lawyers compared to other professions.
Bianca, I would add, I would say two things. One, but this is obviously, we're not scientists, we're not doctors, so I would not want to talk as a doctor. I think I have seen two types of profiles that have probably some admitting and some less admitting. I think the one are the overachievers, the high performing people, because they tend to take on more work. They tend to really want to manage everything. I mean, in a very well-intended way, but I have seen a couple of my team members that are extremely well-performing, high-performing members. They take on too much, and they don't know how to say no and to stop. And with those, they don't recognize the signs of fatigue. They don't recognize the stress. Or, if you look at some research, it talks even like symptoms like PTSD, post-traumatic stress. And so that is things that I think with the high performers that they may not admit to it, but you see it in their behavior, or being more sensitive, or how they react and how their emotions are. On the other hand, I've seen people that are more worrying by nature, and I think those people are more influenced by the media reporting, that they get more nervous about the uncertainty, and that they get extremely anxious, and their anxieties increase because of the external factors, the uncertainty, and the media coverage. Last thing, and the second thing I would just say, is that I am not sure if it's purely the predispositions that impact this, but we all have personal situations, and sometimes we don't see behind. At least in the past, we did not pry, we did not know what individual person situations are. Now these things have come out more. People caring, as I think Chris mentioned, for elderly parents, going shopping for parents, being worried about someone who is elderly, and that person may be infected, may not get the right vaccine, may not get a vaccine. People having experienced death in their family or in their friends. I mean, that's the type of things that I've seen, even people that you would not have expected to be predisposed or to be affected by these circumstances, to suffer because financial hardship, the wife, the partner being laid off or being on reduced work time. So there's an additional element that you don't always control from our side, from work. There's the personal element.
And two comments from my end. I also think that what I have sort of experienced during the pandemic is also that the recently hired people, not having yet an established network within the organization, they have had more problems to manage the situation and been subject to a stress, because they have had more difficulties to really make sure that they have been able to deliver on the different tasks. Because if you have been around for a period, you have your network, you know what you are supposed to do, you know the expectations. I think for these, it has been an easier journey. So I think my theory is that we will have a group of people who didn't get a good start of their career as a result of the pandemic, which can sort of impact their professional life long term.
Perhaps I could also just add, Bianca, I have seen research in relation to different categories of profession, and I'm afraid lawyers do overperform when it comes to mental ill health. So it's not just a sense that that lawyers struggle with things like stress, anxiety, depression, OCD, eating disorders, disproportionately to other professions. The other point, and look, this is something I know more than I'd like to know about, but also addiction. So a lot of lawyers will suffer from different addictions. They don't, it doesn't need to be alcohol or necessarily drugs, although drugs present a particular issue because, of course, they're illegal, or they're illegal in certain jurisdictions, and therefore it means that the stigma around drugs is even higher. So it's very, very difficult to talk about addiction when it comes to drugs. But it could be, whether it's pornography, gaming, gambling, there are lots of things that people can turn to in order to change the way they feel. And whilst the stigma around mental ill health is reducing in many jurisdictions, there's no question in my mind that the related issue of addiction, which is often very closely, intimately related to mental ill health, the stigma is not reducing in relation to that, and people really struggle with talking about areas in which they might be addicted, which is related to a mental ill health issue.
That leads on, Chris, to a number of questions we have had around recognizing the red flags remotely. And I think this is what a lot of leaders are really struggling with. Everyone's having more meetings and talking more, but how can you advise other leaders on recognizing these red flags around addiction and around mental health? Because not everyone will talk about it.
Beatrice, do you want to have a go at that one?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I return with a question, how do you recognize it when a friend doesn't feel well? Or your neighbor? It's the same thing. It's noticing that they're different, noticing that they feel a bit down. Of course, ask them, what we said earlier, right? Start your conversations with your colleagues and your team members by asking how they are. And I think if you're genuinely interested, you will notice it. There's no radar that will tell you there's something wrong, but I think it's just really the interaction and video. All of my calls are video calls, except when I'm sitting in the car on the way to the horse. So I think that really gives you so many clues, and that it's not different from private interactions.
Thank you.
And I think one advice from my end, which we have tried to apply within my groups, is very much to have ad hoc meetings, not really in the calendar. Because if you have everything well planned, people are also quite good at creating a barrier, a facade showing that everything is fine. So I think if you give them a call, they will typically pick up the phone. And that is I think, sometimes when you at least have a bad feeling, a better way to see what the real situation is.
Lisa, I would add, I do think that there are some, again, some signs that people can spot, because I think when you're under stress, it affects your thinking, your emotions, your body, and your behavior. So you do have to read and watch out for these signs. I think if somebody is not concentrated, if you're having a conversation on video and you see that they can't really concentrate, or that they're easily distracted, that they're restless, I think that they're irritable, seeing that they have trouble completing a task, they're blaming others, getting into arguments. I think those are either behaviors, they're either ways of affecting their thinking, their emotions, or their body that you can tell. They're not, there's no checklist, but I think those are things that you can spot, trying to look out for those, because some of it is in your interactions that you can pick them up, some of it is in the work product, and some of it is in the feedback that you get from colleagues talking about how some of your team members may not be necessarily functioning at their best, may have difficulty collaborating, may have difficulty delivering.
Yeah, I think that's really useful.
I think it brings us on to another question that we hear all the time, not only in the legal world, but in politics and everything, about changing your leadership style based, as a result of the pandemic. So how have you found that?
I can maybe quickly respond to that. I've definitely become much closer to my team members. We were close before, but also prior to the pandemic, I've been working from home for the last 9 years, and many of my team members have done the same. But still, we were typically a going to the office and work from the office culture. Now that everybody works from home and we always switch on the video, we do things like virtual coffee chats, virtual after work drinks. We do the walk and talk. I have the impression that I've become much closer with my team and also with other colleagues, which sounds contradictory, but that's how I experience it.
I think in the interest of time, I would just give, I think, a forward answer. I think for me, what has really increased is the leadership by empathy, by trust, authenticity, and collaboration, meaning truly trusting people, because in the past, as I mentioned, we were an organization that was very much based on working from the office, where work from home was not we didn't have formal policies of working from home. And so I think there was initially, for the workforce, for our teams, there was a need for it, a demand for it, and I think from the company, it was something that we needed to get adapted to. We very quickly did, and I think it was building that trust both ways, that people trusted that when you work from home, the work can get done, and I think we have more than proven that this can be done. The other thing is also the empathy side, to understanding a little bit more behind the person and giving people more space and understanding for the different moments that they may go through, and then being authentic in the communications, because I think that's the thing that for me is extremely important. When we have these video calls, you can't connect in the same physical or the same way as when you meet physically. So you have to come across and you have to really emphasize authenticity in the way you collaborate with people.
Absolutely, and I can, knowing all four of you, I think all of you do that very, very well. So we'll coming close to the end of the session here. We've got so many questions, so we might have to follow up with many of you afterwards directly, but we'll put those to Maria, Marco, Beatrice and Chris and get back to you. I'm sure you'll all agree we could chat for hours on this. We should have allowed 2 hours. We really hope this session has given you some tips and ideas to just include in your working day, your team environment and the wider company, which will help you start or continue to have conversations and making a difference to you personally or those around you. We're following up with an online booklet of sorts based on the insights heard in the conversation today, along with some helpful websites and podcasts and information for you and your teams. Bit of a handout, sort of go to this in case. And obviously feel free to give us your ideas, as some of you have been doing in the chat function. A brief survey will pop up on your screen shortly when the webinar finishes. It will take a few minutes to complete, and it will just let us know how you found this session today and where we can provide value in future webinars. So thank you again for joining us and for listening at a later date for doing so. And special thanks to our panelists, Chris Parsons, Maria Hemberg, Marco Kerschen and Beatrice Voss. Have a wonderful day and a positive year ahead. All the best from us at Major Lindsay in Africa. Thank you very much.
Chris, do you want to say a few words as well?
No, I think all I wanted to say, other than really to thank the panel, the two of you and everyone for listening, would be to say if people wanted to send us invites on LinkedIn, that would be absolutely fine, I'm sure, with all of us. I regularly post stuff on mental well-being. I'm doing a TEDx talk shortly with my story, so people might want to see that as well. And I guess if there was something that resonated very specifically with you, I'm sure that none of us would mind you contacting us directly through our email addresses. Certainly mine's on LinkedIn. So, you know, if you want to learn about horse riding, then Beatrice is the person for you. But otherwise, I just want to say a big thanks, and I've really enjoyed today. Great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
Bye.